Believe it or not, but Cayman GT4 and Boxster Spyder prices might be up for another round of price increases, and that is remarkable to say the least. We just saw that the price increase rate was dropping in those markets. Moreover, it are only the GT4 and Spyder segments that saw further price increases. The GT4 and the Spyder are of course very special cars, and many petrolheads, including me, aspire to own one, do own one, or did own one and moved up to the GT3. It's a class leader, but to be honest, also the only car in its class that offers the baby supercar experience. Yes, you can have an M2 CS, M3 or even a Lotus Exige, but none of them strike as fine of a balance between giving you that sports car feel while also allowing you to drive without ear protection. The GT4 and the Spyder are indeed something special. But now that the end is in sight for these cars, more and more people might be putting their money where their mouth is and purchase one. And this hasn't always been the case. We saw, for example, that 981 GT4 values came down a lot after speculators inflated them after their introduction. However, more recently we saw values increase and we saw that the increase rate in the price trend was decreasing. Yet, we can now see that the market might be gearing up for another round of price increases. But more about that later. We will first have a look at the current GT4 and Spyder market. Over here we have the US market and we can see that there are 99 GT4s and Spyders for sale when we only consider the 718 and the 981 generations. The 981 Spyder is with only 3 cars for sale extremely rare. Supply for the 981 GT4 is slightly larger with 21 cars, but the 718 market has the highest supply level. There are 45 718 GT4s for sale and 30 718 Boxster Spyders. Now if we look at the prices, we can see that the 718 GT4 demands a premium of $31,000 over the 981 GT4. Yet, there is some overlap between the two models. The lowest mileage 981 GT4s, so the ones with less than 5,000 miles, go for the same price as the highest mileage 718 GT4s. And high in this case means more than 15,000 miles. Yes, there are people who actually use their GT4s. Now if we look then at the 718 Spyder, we can see that they are $3,000 cheaper than the GT4. And this matches with the difference in MSRP. Note by the way that there are a few cars that are priced quite low, but these cars are new cars that are listed for MSRP. But I'm not sure if you would be able to get them for that price. But now then, we are up to date on the current market, and that means that it's time to have a look at the price development over time. You see, the prices that we just looked at are actually a lot higher than the prices 3 months ago. And that's something that I didn't expect. It namely goes completely against the trend that we can see in other markets. In my previous Cayman market update I showed you that the price trends in the GT4 markets were also flattening, but that there was a bit more upward momentum than in the rest of the market. And this upward momentum brought the market now to new heights. Let's get to it. Over here we have the price developments for the 718 GT4 and Spyders and the 981 GT4 and Spyders. And we can see immediately what happened in the last 3 months. Prices are up across the board. If we start at the top, we can see that the 718 GT4 increased by 6.4%. And this means that a used GT4 costs now on average $149,000. And this is a crazy increase when you realize that it happened in only 3 months. Naturally, this price increase is also statistically confirmed, which means that it's unlikely to be the result of chance. Now at 3.5%, the increase is slightly smaller in the 718 Spyder market, but it's impressive nonetheless. The price trend in that market can be a bit more volatile due to the smaller market size, so I wouldn't read too much into this. However, it is the 981 GT4 market segment that saw the largest price increase. Prices increased by 10.3% or $11,000, and this means that a 981 GT4 will cost you now around $118,000, and that's around 33% more than in December 2020. And this is again an astonishing increase for such a short time period, and also the largest increase in this market. If we move on then to the 981 Spyder, we can see that prices went up with 7.1%. Yet, we saw that supply is extremely low in this market, so it's questionable if we can really trust this price increase. All in all, the values are up across the board, but as you can see, it are especially the GT4s that took off. And this might come as a little bit of a surprise, at least it did for me. As I mentioned before, we previously discussed that GT4 still had an upward momentum, but that it would be likely that this would fade away. After all, that's what we can see in the rest of the market and also what we saw in the GT4 price trends. 981 values were coming down, but started to increase during December 2020, and so did 718 GT4 values and pretty much all other cars in the market. However, it was last winter that we saw a slowdown in the upward price trend. 981 GT4 values came down by 2% and 718 GT4 values didn't change. And as you can see from the graph, this meant that the upward price trend was still intact, but also that a slowdown was likely. It was around this time that many other markets saw their price trends flattening. Yet, the majority of them remained flat, but not this one as we can see. Perhaps the slowdown over here was just a little winter dip. Who knows? What we do know is that this resurgence of prices means that the upward price trend is fully restored, and that this is one of the few models for which this is the case. Most markets are flat. Let me show you what I mean. But before I do so, if you like this video, please support the channel by clicking on the like button down below. Thank you. Now then, let's start by having a look at the normal Boxster and normal Cayman market. Over here we have from top to bottom the price trends for the 981s and 718s, and this only includes the base and the S models. For the 718 Boxster we miss a few data points, but this will do for now. We can namely see that prices started to increase somewhere around December 2020, and this is the same as in the GT4 and the Spyder market. What's also the same is the flattening in the price trend between November and February. Yet, in the normal Cayman and Boxster market, this flattening seems to have indicated the end of the upward price trend. Cayman 981 prices even came down slightly, while the rest of the market remained flat. And the trend what you see here is quite representative for the rest of the market. We can see the same when we look at the other side of the GT4 price range. Over there we find the GT3. If we look at the price trend for the 991 GT3, we can see the exact same pattern as in the Cayman and the Boxster market. A large price increase followed by a flat development between last year's summer and April. And again, this is representative for the larger market and hereby deviates significantly from the Spyder and the GT4 market. I think you understand what I'm getting at here. So what exactly is happening here? Well, it's always difficult to find the reasons for these price movements in the data. However, to me it seems that the reason for these price increases might be demand driven, as supply remained more or less the same. Over here we have the market characteristics for the 718 and 981 GT4 market, with the supply graph on the left. And you can see that the graphs are split between the new and the used cars. The blue line shows supply for the new 718 GT4s, the orange one for the used 718s, and the green ones for the 981 GT4s. Now if we focus on the blue and the orange line first, we can see that supply was at its maximum level at December 2020. There were 105 cars for sale, but supply was made up mainly out of new cars. But then the well-known shortages kicked in and new supply tumbled. Since April of last year, only a handful of new cars were advertised for sale, and momentarily there are no cars that are advertised for sale. Supply for the used cars increased gradually, but it remained stable since November of last year. Hence, supply levels didn't change while prices went up. So either demand is way up, pushing the prices up, or the people who got an early allocation are now trying to flip it for insane prices. We can see from the middle graph that the median mileage for the used cars that are advertised for sale increased steadily, and that it sits now at 3,500 miles. Now imagine that you owned the car for a year. You added 3,500 miles and now you see that the median price is $149,000 and that the trend is going up. I guess it's tempting for many owners to put their cars up for sale. But this is of course just speculation, especially since there are only a handful of cars that are for sale today that were also for sale back in the days. Now to get a little bit more insight into what is happening, we can look at the average days it takes to sell a GT4. You see, if supply is constant while the selling speed increased, it might point towards an increase in demand, and this in turn would validate the large price increase that we have seen earlier. Let's have a look. Over here we have the date on the horizontal axis and the time to sell on the vertical axis. Yet, before we continue, I would like to mention that this analysis is based on data from AutoTempest. AutoTempest conveniently pulls listings from a bunch of different websites into one place, so that you can browse through all of them. Check out the link in the description to find the GT4s for sale right now. So how should we interpret this graph? Let's take this 2021 Q3 value for the 718 GT4 as an example. This point has a value of 21, which means that the cars that were sold in 2021 Q3 were on average 21 days advertised for sale, and hereby it's not an exact measure of the time it takes to sell a GT4, rather it's a proxy. Now if we look at the trends, we can see that the values increased at the beginning of the pandemic, No surprises over there. What's also not a surprise is the drop that followed. These cars were in high demand and were selling quickly. A 718 GT4 was on average only listed for 19 days. As prices soared, the time to sell slowly increased, but remained low nonetheless. But what about the most recent period, where we saw prices soar again? Well, we can see that the cars are indeed selling quicker. The difference is not night and day, but we can see that historically it changes with relatively small steps. For the 718 it dropped from 32 to 28 days, while it dropped from 37 to 31 days for the 981. And the magnitude of the decrease over here matches with the price increase that we saw earlier. Prices increased the most in the 981 GT4 market. So this development over here might validate the price increase. Hence, demand seems to be up as the time to sell a car decreased, while supply remained constant. What's by the way also interesting to see, but less related to the previous issue, is the downward trend in the 981 GT4 segment. In 2019 it took on average 60 days to sell one, while we are currently down to 30. Moreover, they are selling basically as quick as a 718 GT4. The popularity of the 981 definitely increased over time. And with that it's time to wrap up and conclude. During the last few months I've been showing you flattening price trends. GT4 and Spyder prices however ignored these market trends completely, as prices soared during the last 3 months. Increases varied from 3.5% in the Spyder market to 6.4 and 10.3% in the 981 and 718 GT4 market. So it are especially the GT4s that deserve our attention here. We checked out the price trends for the normal Boxsters and the Caymans, and also for the GT3s, and prices in those markets are flattening, and it hereby highlights that the increase in the GT4 market is quite special indeed. But is this price increase an anomaly and will prices fall back, or is it the continuation of the previous upward price trend? We first looked at the supply side and saw that there were no major changes compared to the previous period. Hence, the price increase might be demand driven. We then looked at the time it takes to sell a GT4, and this indeed revealed that the cars are selling slightly quicker in Q2 than that they did before. The differences are not large, but they fit with the narrative. But the price increase and the underlying data points are not sufficient to really call this the start of a new trend. We need to be realistic, we only have one timestamp available. Nevertheless, the price increase is supported by the underlying data, so there's a good chance that it is a real increase and not just a random summer effect. Therefore, it might evolve into the continuation of the previous uptrend. Additionally, it will be interesting to see if we can start to see the same effect in other markets. So far this hasn't been the case, as GT3 prices for example remained flat or even decreased. And with that we arrived at the end of this video. Now if you enjoy this data-driven way of analyzing car markets but would have liked to see the analysis for a different car, let me know the car for which you would like to see an analysis by commenting it down below in the comment section. Once there are enough requests for a certain car, I will make a video about it. As always, thank you for watching and I hope to see you next week for a new video.